Hello everyone and welcome back to my MATLAB programming tutorial series. In this video, we'll learn about conditional statements, specifically how to use the if, else-if, and else statements in MATLAB. Conditional statements allow your program to make decisions, to do one thing if a condition is true and something else if it's false. We'll start with a simple example to understand the concept and then apply it to a real-world problem, determining the state of water based on temperature. All right, let's begin with our first example, checking if a number is negative or non-negative. Let's go through it line by line. The first line is a comment. In MATLAB, comments begin with a percent symbol. Comments help describe what the code does, but they don't affect how the program runs. Next, we use the input function to ask the user for a value. A equals input, enter a real value for variable a. When this line runs, MATLAB displays the message in quotes and waits for the user to type a number. Whatever number is entered, for example, -5 or 12, it gets stored in the variable a. Now comes the conditional part of our code. If a is less than 0. This means if the value of a is less than 0, MATLAB executes the next line. Disp, you entered a negative number. The disp function simply displays text in the command window. If the condition is not true, MATLAB skips that line and goes to the else section instead. Disp, you entered a non-negative number. So this message appears for any value of a that's 0 or positive. Finally, every if statement in MATLAB must end with the keyword end. That tells MATLAB where the conditional block finishes. Let's test it. If I enter -3, MATLAB prints, you entered a negative number. If I enter 10, it says, you entered a non-negative number. This is the foundation of all decision-making in MATLAB, using if and else to control what your program does. Now that we understand the basics, let's apply that knowledge to a more practical scenario, determining the state of water. This script uses conditional statements to check the state of water, whether it's solid, liquid, or gas, based on its temperature in Celsius. Our comment section clearly explains what the program does and reminds us that water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius and boils at 100 degrees Celsius. We again use the input function. Temp equals input, enter water temperature in Celsius. This stores the user's response in the variable temp. The first condition checks if the temperature is below 0 degrees Celsius. If temp less than 0. In that case, water is frozen, so we display water is in the solid state. Then we check if the temperature is exactly 0 degrees Celsius. ELSEIF temp equals 0. At this point, water can exist as both solid and liquid, so we display water is in the solid or liquid state. Notice that we use two equal signs instead of one. In MATLAB, a single equals is used for assignment, storing a value, while double equals is used for comparison, checking if two values are equal. Next, for temperatures greater than 0 and less than 100, we use a logical AND operator, written as two ampersands, and. Else, if temp greater than 0 and temp less than 100. That means both parts of the condition must be true. If so, MATLAB displays water is in the liquid state. If the temperature is exactly 100 degrees Celsius, we display water is in the liquid or gaseous state. That's because water is at its boiling point, transitioning between liquid and vapor. Finally, if none of the conditions above are true, meaning the temperature is above 100 degrees Celsius, we display water is in the gaseous state. And once again, we close the block with the keyword END. Let's test it with a few examples. If we enter -10, MATLAB says water is in the solid state. If we enter 25, we get water is in the liquid state. If we enter 120, we see water is in the gaseous state. Everything works exactly as expected. To summarize, the if statement lets MATLAB make decisions. If checks your first condition, elif lets you test additional conditions, else runs if none of the previous conditions are true. And every if block must end with END. You can use this structure in any MATLAB program to compare values, check ranges, or make your scripts respond dynamically to user input. If you found this tutorial helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future MATLAB programming lessons. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.